Courage speaks. Courage speaks. Courage speaks.
Welcome to episode 27 of Courage Speaks. I'm your host, Sam Sherman. Courage Speaks is brought to you by Courage to Connect, an outpatient mental health center offering therapy, psychological testing, psychiatry, and dietitian services for all ages located on Chicago's North Shore. On today's episode of Courage Speaks, I'm going to tell a story about football, sure, but mostly about resilience, loss, and the quiet strength found in vulnerability. Matt Skura spent 7 years in the NFL, but he wasn't exactly a star right from the start. He was an undrafted free agent, someone who had to claw his way onto a team, fight for every opportunity, and find any edge he could, physically and mentally. But today's story is even bigger than football. We're talking with Matt about something deeper, his personal journey with mental health. Matt opens up about losing his father to suicide and how that profound loss transformed him into an advocate determined to destigmatize conversations around mental health, especially among men. This is about the resilience we find when life hands us something unimaginable and how one man's experience is now helping others navigate their own struggles. It's about finding strength in places you might not expect. Without further ado, here is my conversation with NFL veteran and mental health advocate Matt Skura. And this episode is dedicated to the memory of Matt's father, Douglas Skura. Matt Skura, thank you so much for joining Courage Speaks. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Kids are off to school, so it's a nice, quiet start to the day and feeling like a productive week ahead.
Yeah, I'm here in Chicago, and we were 70 degrees on Friday, this past Friday. Yesterday, it was snowing and about 30, and I haven't been outside yet today, but hopefully it's at least somewhere in the middle of those.
Yeah, that's just like classic Midwest transition from winter to spring. I'm from Ohio originally,
yeah.
so I totally get it. And it's like the first day that's sunny and maybe even like above 50 degrees. I mean, it's t-shirt, short weather, and getting fully prepared for spring and summer. So
Yes.
got to take advantage.
I've heard somebody call it the spring of deception or something when it first
Yes,
rolled out that way.
100%.
So Matt, I'm so glad that we're able to connect, because we were just talking right before we're officially recording. But you and I, the sort of missions of the work that we're doing are very much aligned in terms of just normalizing conversations around mental health, working toward destigmatizing a lot of these conversations and discussions. And I think what's so amazing is that you're coming from the perspective of you're doing this as an NFL veteran, somebody who played in the NFL, somebody who was a team captain at Duke University. Congratulations, by the way, y'all won the ACC tournament.
Yeah, huge win.
So, but as somebody that comes from the sports world, but even before that, at Duke, you were a psychology major, if I understand correctly. And I'm curious at that. So, picking psychology as a major, do you remember kind of what your motivation was for that, or kind of when that interest sort of started?
It was really when I would be studying film. So I loved understanding my opponents through the game film and the preparation, because I just had some really great coaches and some older guys too, understanding, okay, every person has a tell. It's almost kind of like a poker game. Everyone has some way of telling you what they're going to be doing, what they're not going to be doing. So I just really started to gain an interest in psychology because it was very similar, just understanding human behavior. And so it really helped me with my film preparation. It's like, okay, when a guy puts his left hand down, he might be wanting to go to the left, or he's using it to go to the right, the way a stance or alignment, all these different details that for the most part people would look over. But for me, it was just such another layer for me to be good at my job. You know, I wasn't the most athletically gifted or the biggest or whatever it was, but I needed to find my winning edge to help me gain an advantage over my opponent. So kind of getting inside the minds of my opponent, and also just helped me too. Just I've always been a big preparation kind of guy. Like I feel the best when I'm most prepared. So that was the biggest way for me to kind of connect my passion of football and psychology.
And you're somebody who, you were an undrafted free agent. You played in the league for 7 years, I believe. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so being an undrafted free agent, I mean, I don't need to tell you this, but just me as just not as a former NFL player or any professional, and not forget about professional. I'm a rec league 16-inch softball guy here in Chicago. So that's the peak of my athletic ability. But it's just to say that for our listeners, being an undrafted free agent is a really, it's a hard path to make it in a D1 setting, let alone playing in the league and all that kind of stuff. But your journey of not being a guy who was drafted and had to really, really scrap and claw and fight your way to starting in the NFL and playing for as long as you did, what was that like? Just kind of particularly being a guy who was a captain at Duke, and I mean, of course, through high school and having all this success and getting up to the point of maybe, I'm sure hoping to get drafted. That doesn't end up happening, but I'd imagine that just mentally, that's a lot to take on. What was that like?
Yeah, just having the awareness that, okay, I'm now starting back at the bottom of the totem pole. I think that's having that mindset and understanding, okay, I excelled really well in college. I was a captain, all conference, all American. But really, all that stuff goes out the window once you get into an NFL facility, and you got to earn your stripes, honestly, no matter what. But especially as an undrafted guy, everyone, once you have that label put on you, you have to do everything in your power to fight against it. And so going back to like the foundation of who I am, it's like you're always going to know I'm the hardest worker. I'm going to show up prepared every day, and I'm going to battle and show value any way that I can. And I'm not, to have too much of an ego to hold bags or to go grab something for the older guys or to help the coach out or stay afterwards after a hot training camp practice. So that was just really what I leaned into, just doing everything that I can to show value, to show up to every meeting, every weightlifting session, every practice with enthusiasm, with effort, because it's so easy once you don't get drafted to mentally just go in the tank and be like, you know what, like now that I didn't get drafted, nothing matters. Like, why am I even doing any of this? So, kind of fighting those doubts and fighting all the negativity that I kind of even put on myself was the biggest thing. So just going in there like, hey, once again, I need to be able to show up and not make mistakes. And so that's going back in to my hotel room at night, studying my plays, looking at film, so that when I get my opportunities in practice, I can take the most advantage of them. My opportunities, especially my rookie year, were extremely small.
Mm.
I say like it was the easiest training camp I ever had because I'm thinking like, oh, this is great. Like they must be saving me for something. And it's like, no, like you're just undrafted and
Mm.
your opportunities, you'll an individual, you'll get some work in, but the team periods, I was getting like 1 to 3 reps every team period against the defense. So whether it was 1 rep and I had to like just make my block and it wasn't anything incredible, as long as I was doing my assignment, that's what I had to bring to the table. And so as you build trust and all those things with your teammates and coaches, then those opportunities open up.
We're going to talk about this as we continue on, but something that you speak about is this idea of like intentionality being one of the really important things for your mindset and a lot of the work that you've done and how you help others. And it seems to me like you have to be so intentional when you know going in, and you talk about awareness, that you're going to have such, particularly at the beginning there, that so few opportunities to prove yourself or to really show what you can do. And again, you might, if you have 1 to 3 reps, per day or whatever the case might be, you may not even have that opportunity maxing out in those three, because you know what I mean, where it's just like you could do everything right and still, so it's just probably having to be real intentional, but again, awareness being a big component of that as well.
100%. Yeah.
Do you remember, I gotta ask, like, do you remember what your first, I guess, was there a welcome to the NFL moment, or a moment that you were like, okay, I'm here, or this is a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was probably multiple, I was signing like my signing bonus, which was like 5 grand, and then our second round pick was signing his for like 1.3 million. And so I was in the same room as him,
Yeah.
and I was like, all right, welcome to the NFL moment number one. I think the second one was probably in practice. I remember I was playing left guard, and Zadarius Smith lined up over me, and I felt like he was a mile away, and felt like I was on an island and all these things. And it was just like he was lined up at it. You go back and look at it on film, he's like, no, he's just lined up as a 3 technique right over you. But like your eyes get big, and he puts some like crazy move on me that I'm just like have never seen before. And then I remember we had played, it was 2017. Yeah, 2017. Yeah, we played in Green Bay, playing right guard. I pull around thinking I'm going to, really meet this linebacker and hit him hard. And he flattened me on my back. And that was like another welcome to the NFL moment. I mean, there's just different moments along the process that's like, okay, this is no longer college or high school. And yeah, I mean, even like the first day ever for rookie mini camp, I just kept on getting all the calls wrong. And because I just had never seen like a base defense, just like 5 guys along the line of scrimmage. And the coach was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just sliding everyone the way I did in college. They're like, no, that guy on the end, he's like a Terrell Suggs. Like, you can't let him free. I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess we're all like one on one. So just learning you're not always going to get help. You have to
Hmm.
win your one on one battles. And I mean, there's just so many moments like throughout your career where you're like, okay, you just learn every step along the way. And when you have really great leaders, they kind of show you beforehand. And but a lot of it too is you just have to experience it yourself.
You had your first, I believe, first starting opportunity to come and start in place of Marshall Yanda, or Marshall, is it
Yeah,
Yanda?
Marshall Yonda. Yep.
Yanda, yeah. And so was that when you went in for him when he was injured? Was that the first time that you had starting reps then in the NFL?
Yeah, in a regular season setting, that
Mm,
preseason, I had started a bunch
mm.
in the preseason games, but so I had a little bit of a taste of kind of what that was and kind of a pregame routine, but nothing in terms of actual regular season game, which made it fun.
What was that like? Just, when you, again, in sports, it happens all the time, but sometimes you're the one getting hurt, which we'll talk about. Sometimes it's other people, and it's just, next man up, next person up mentality. But as somebody who, just did everything, was, really maxed out the trying to get the edges with everything you could do physically, everything you could do mentally, and in the, just thinking about the psychological, the tells, all that, and then finally getting that opportunity. Was it at all, I guess, if you go back to that time, going in under the circumstances of somebody getting hurt, is that even on your mind at that point? Or is it really just like, I've been working for this and I got to just help out what's the mentality at that point?
Well, you really don't know because when someone gets hurt, you don't know if you're going to be the one that's called up. So I was on practice squad, or if they're just going to plug someone in
Mm,
from the 53-man roster. And I had talked about this in a newsletter a few weeks ago of like, don't get ready, stay ready, because I had been released from the Ravens the end of training camp, and just another learning lesson. Welcome to the NFL moment. I had just gone completely in the tank mentally, thought I had done everything to show my value and that I should have made the initial 53. I didn't. 2 weeks go by, and I'm just like, not, my head's like not even in the playbook. I'm just doing what I'm told from a practice squad sake as far as just getting the defense ready. And yeah, so Marshall gets hurt. I go back. That's on a Sunday. Monday, I come in. I'm lifting. They said, "Hey, Ozzie Newsome, who was the GM at the time, wants to see you." I'm like, "Great." I'm actually getting cut. Like I'm getting fully released. And he lets me know that they're signing me to the 53. So
Wow.
even then, I'm still not thinking I'm starting.
Hmm.
I just feel like, okay, I'm just going to go from practice squad to reserve role. Well, then Tuesday comes around and my offensive line coach says, "Hey, we're actually going to have you start at right guard. And also, we're flying to London Thursday night to play the Jacksonville Jaguars." So I had to cram all of that information and really get mentally ready to go play in a game. So I didn't what was kind of nice was I didn't have much time to dwell on like, okay, I'm not ready mentally, but
Sure.
I was. And yeah, so we fly to London and go through all that. But yeah, my mentality was just like lean into what if you're feeling nervous, excited, just like lean into it, don't fight it, because then that will give you the energy and the focus throughout the game. So that really helped me that first game to really just, get out all those nerves, try to somewhat get a pregame routine. It was a little bit tough with the time difference and trying to wake up. But yeah, when you're in those moments, you just got to lean on your preparation, know that you've put in a lot of hard work and you know the rest will kind of take care of itself and that's just the mentality I went with it.
We as working it, as a therapist, a lot of times what we talk about is this idea of right proactivity and reactivity, where the reason we want to work on things proactively, the skills, the techniques, all that kind of stuff, is so that we always are going to have to be reactive in some way, but it's nice if we've got the proactive kind of fundamentals or foundation, which you kind of paint a perfect picture of that, which is you were ready, even if you didn't feel like, even if it would be impossible to know what it would be like in the moment except for when it happens. But it's like, even if you were like, I don't know if I was ready, and then I like how you said, I knew I was, but it kind of can kind of challenge that, maybe some of the doubt, because it's like, no, I've been working for this. And that's kind of that proactive approach and doing
Yeah.
all the front end stuff. So talking about injuries, because I know this was one of those parts of one of the sort of parts of your career that I know had a pretty major impact on the field. I had to reread this about 3 or 4 times because I didn't really believe it. I mean, it was hard to believe. You in a game you tore an ACL, an MCL. You're not your ACL, MCL, PCL, and a dislocated kneecap. Is that right?
Yeah, yep, that sums it up.
Can you? So I was reading a story about this and about that experience. Would you mind just sharing for our listeners, if it's okay, just kind of taking us through that experience and kind of how that happened?
Yeah, so we were playing Monday Night Football against Los Angeles Rams. We were in LA and playing at the Coliseum. Second So the first drive of the game, we scored touchdown. It's going great. Come back for our second drive. We go for it on fourth down, and we get into this like funky formation where basically we have like five guys to the left of me on the offensive line. We put our right tackle at left tackle. We have another tight end left of him. So we'd run a power play. So I block back on my nose guard, and my foot is in the ground, and one of the defensive linemen get thrown into the bottom part of my knee. And in a moment, like in an instant, I just hear like it's like three really fast pops
Hmm.
and a lot of pain. And so I immediately fall to the ground. I'm like on my stomach. And I've had other MCL sprains before. So I knew like it was probably something similar to that, but I honestly didn't think it was as serious as what the diagnosis came out to be.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm laying on my stomach. Like I try to move my left leg and my knee is feeling kind of stuck. And so the medical staff comes over. I'm like, hey, I got my knee rolled into. And so they're like, all right, let's roll over, roll over. My knee kind of unlocks essentially. So that was my kneecap coming back into place.
Hmm.
And sitting on the ground and Lamar Jackson's like, "Skura, get your ass up." I'm like, "All right, like, yeah, I think I can." Like, in some pain, but I don't know, like, we'll see. So I
Mhm.
go to, like, one of my teammates gives her hand out, so I pull myself up, and as soon as I put my heel into the ground, it was like all that pain just came rushing back. I'm like, "Yeah, nope, sit me back down."
Yeah.
I thought I was gonna be able to walk off the field. So cart comes out, go back to the locker room, get an X-ray. They're cutting off my jersey, all this stuff. I have to call my wife from LA because she's back here in Charlotte watching the game. And luckily, the head orthopedic, who ended up doing my surgery, she calls my wife and she's like, "Hey, Matt had a serious knee injury, but he'll be able to play football again." And that was a relief for me to hear and
Mhm.
for my wife. Yeah, I'm just like sitting there at the training table. They're checking the bottom of my foot, making sure I don't have any serious artery or nerve damage where I would have to go and rush to the emergency room
Mhm.
because amputation becomes a thought because you're not getting blood circulation. So yeah, I ended up tearing ACL, MCL, PCL, and dislocated my kneecap. Get surgery about a week or two after that, and then go into the full rehab process. And so
Mhm.
definitely learned a lot there about myself, mental resilience,
Yeah.
mental toughness, pain tolerance, all of that. So yeah, it was quite an experience.
It's just like my job, I sit for a living. And I think that if I had that combination of injuries, I think I would have to be done. That would be it. And I'm not a football player. So again, it's unbelievable. You talk about, yeah, that mental resilience to be able to come back. And even at the time of just again thinking about your journey, thinking about how hard you worked to get to that point, you have an injury and just kind of having to continue. I think that people probably, I'll just speak for myself. I think that there's something that I take for granted about like thinking about athletes like yourself who, you know, when an injury happens and the fans read the next day that the person's going to be able to come back later in the year or the next year or something. It's like, oh, okay, good. But not knowing what that process, the rehabilitation and the treatment and recovery process is like. Now, here's the other part of it. The physical side of it is one thing, which that's challenging enough. Something that is really incredible about you is the fact that is your advocacy for talking about the mental component, the psychological component of that sort of part of the recovery, that sort of part of the process. And so I'm curious, when you first got into the league, particularly as a rookie, and there's all of the sort of, rookie camps and things like that, from that end of it, how much when you got into the league were things like mental health, were things like, I guess, the psychological component of the game, how much of that was sort of talked about? Was it talked about? If it was, like, what were you hearing at that point?
Really, a lot of it was like your preparation, like being in the playbook and playing tough, playing physical, kind of in that sense. It was more direct with football and when you're in the building. And a lot of it too was like, okay, when you're outside of the building, like make sure you're taking care of your business, handling yourself in a professional manner,
Mhm.
all those things that I was kind of already equipped with, but not. But I also, was different for me too is like I never had a major injury, so
Mhm.
that was a whole new path for me. And yeah, so like my rookie year was almost, it'll be 10 years next year. And even though it seems a long time ago, it's really like not. And
Right.
yeah, it was talked about a little bit, but not anything crazy to like the level it is today with like social media and
Mm.
just really athletes in general talking about it and the struggles that they go through and how much more common we have like just in
Yeah.
general than differences. So yeah, I was, yeah, I didn't really have like that structure put in place. I just had my routine that I was trying to figure out. I wasn't really doing what I do now, like journaling. Like that's my like number one mental health practice. I wasn't really doing that. I was just like, okay, writing my plays down and I feel prepared and I feel ready for the next day, then I'll have that confidence. And
Mhm.
for the most part, like that worked. But when true adversity hits, like an injury, like getting benched or, getting cut or whatever it is, that's when you need, we always talk about you fall to the level of your training when it's a critical moment in a game, like a third down, a fourth down, need to score a touchdown, need to go on a 2-minute drive. So if your training's really great, you're going to play great. But if
Right.
you have no floor, you're just going to fall completely down. So that a little bit was for me on the mental health side, just
Yeah.
going through that injury and all those sort of things.
It sounds like a lot of the focus, like you said, on the kind of the NFL side of it at that time was around specific to game, specific to on the field preparation, that kind of stuff, but not necessarily when something on the field or off the field can kind of impact you like mentally and maybe like that kind of stuff. It was more like, how can you just get ready for the next game or the next practice, that sort of thing. Is that kind of about right?
Yeah, exactly. And then if you wanted to get help, you kind of had to do it on your own, and it wasn't something that was necessarily brought up in the building. At least I felt like, or you wouldn't even be. It wasn't even on your radar to even think about. Hey, I want to go to this team psychologist or a team clinician. Like you just there was. I don't even think there was really like that structure put in place, and so it wasn't even on your mind.
Yeah, it was. We talk about that a lot with like mental health accessibility, even just all over, in this country, where a lot of times we think about, trying to destigmatize these conversations to create more access. But a lot of times it's access is one thing, but like awareness, the education around that these services even exist is the larger barrier, because a lot of times people don't even know that there is the help out there, let alone, knowing that it's there and the difficulty that it can be in reaching out. So I want to talk a little bit about your dad, if that's okay. And I want to say that before talking about this, I just want to say that ever since kind of reading your story and learning more about you, I just the courage and the bravery that you've had to share the story about your father and your experience in the ways that you have. I don't need to tell you this from a but because I know that you know this, but really the number one research shows that the number one way to fight stigmas in mental health, or really in a lot of different things, is people sharing their stories, people sharing their experiences, us hearing. So that's, like you said, that commonality, or it's like, oh, if I'm experiencing something and I feel like alone, or I'm the only person, and I hear that somebody else has experienced it, and they, the way that they got through it or the way that they navigated it and all of that. So I just give you unbelievable I have unbelievable admiration for your bravery and courage and in sharing the story about your father and continuing to do the work that you do. So for our listeners, just Matt, your father died by suicide a few years ago. And this is something that really I know. Well, before kind of getting into that, I'd love, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about your dad, because I know that he's someone who, just the way that you write about him, the way that you've spoken about him, he just sounds like just an unbelievable person. And so I'd love if you don't mind, if you could just share a little bit about who that man was.
Of course, thank you. Yeah, my dad was someone who I looked up to with everything. He was I think one of the smartest people that I've ever been around. Just knew everything about everything and taught me and my brothers so many life lessons. He was from Alberta, Canada, grew up in a really small coal mining town, probably just a few hours, maybe even less, of the Montana border. So grew up in the Rocky Mountains. And so that's where he taught us a lot of life lessons. We
Mhm.
would go up there fishing and would tell us about all the hard work he put in with his dad. His dad was a coal miner, and just really got to see a whole other side of life. And we also saw, just through his line of work, he was an orthopedic surgeon.
Uh,
So he obviously had a very busy schedule and his time was very limited, especially out of work. And he always made time for us, all of our sports. He was our ice hockey coach. He was our baseball coach. He would come to our football games and football practices and really just loved being involved as a parent and really just encouraged us to get involved in as many things as possible. And yeah, he just really showed us like what it meant to work hard and to really be dedicated to something in your life and to be passionate about it, like to love it. And he supported me with football, even though all the injury risks and
Mm,
this and that, he supported me in it. And I loved that I was able to take him along that journey with me, going, to different schools on recruiting visits. He didn't really understand football. I was born in Pittsburgh, and so we were all like diehard everything Pittsburgh.
mhm,
So that's kind of where he started to learn about the game of football, but it really grew more when I was getting recruited and then going to play college Duke, and for him to be able to go to all these different stadiums, same thing in the NFL. I just that was I know he was very proud of me, but like also like I was proud of myself to kind of have my dad along that journey, just because I knew that he would, in his wildest dreams, never have thought that he would have a son play professional sports, let alone football. And yeah, and so going back to the advocacy part of it, when he had passed, like, with my brothers, and I think it was just like a collective decision among the three of us, like, we're not going to suppress this, and we're not going to just let this something be hidden to be ashamed about. And even for me, like, I was like, I feel like I just need to talk about this. Like, I have this platform, and I feel like I can reach so many people who do feel ashamed and guilty and don't have the means to reach out to a large audience. And I just really wanted to make people not feel alone in the way they feel. I've not dealt with, but been around kids and classmates who took their own life in high school.
mhm.
And like the way that I look back on that now is like totally different than the way I would have handled it today. And yeah, like it completely shaped the way I looked, mental health, mental illness, what the signs are if someone is going through a crisis, how to get them help, the resources that are available. And so that was just like my mission to help people, talk about this. And the more we talk about it, the more we make it more acceptable to share our feelings. And, I feel angry. I feel guilty. I'm sad. I'm confused. I don't have answers. Like sharing that and so showing like, hey, I know that I've played football at the professional level, but we have these connections that we can make to make us feel a little bit more connected and similar in those ways. So yeah, it's something that I'm obviously very passionate about, and something that has allowed me to connect with so many people in different areas of life, whether it's healthcare, military, sports, whatever it is across the board. It's been really powerful.
First, again, thank you for sharing that. And when you came together as a family and decided kind of the way that you were going to move forward in terms of talking about it, right, and coming together with that kind of unity, was there any, from your perspective, being a pro athlete, and was there any apprehension, or was there any worry or concern about speaking out about kind of talking about your feelings at that level and about your story and your experiences? I mean, I guess this could be said for anybody in your family, just from, everyone's got their own, not just in sports, these things are stigma, there's stigmas around these all over the place. But from your perspective, was there any kind of apprehension on that from the beginning?
I definitely think there was, because I didn't want other people to feel uncomfortable around me.
Mm,
And I didn't want people to feel like I have this dark cloud, and
mm,
they would feel uncomfortable approaching me about it. And honestly, like I had a conversation when I was with the Rams. That's who I signed to after my dad had passed. And an assistant coach came up to me. I was just sitting in the meeting room by myself. That's when it finally kind of had been realized like this is what had happened. And even for him to say, "Hey, like, are we okay talking about this? Like, I know this happened, and I don't want it to be awkward or insensitive." And like, I really appreciated him like coming forward and actually like saying, "Hey, this is something that I've been thinking about," and I'm sure other guys had been too. And I told him like, "No, I want to talk about this. Like, I don't want to make it feel uncomfortable, even though that it is, but I'm comfortable talking about it. This is something that, when I discuss my dad's story and when I discuss him and what we all went through, that's therapeutic for me. That's part of my healing as well." And so through sharing my dad's story, sharing my experience with what had happened, giving it air and I'm giving it life so that guys feel comfortable, like not only talking about what happened with my dad with me, but just in general. Like I want them to know like I'm okay and I can talk about, suicide. I could talk about mental health, mental performance, mental fitness. So that definitely was on top of my mind just because it does have that stigma and people do look at you a different way and they don't want to push the wrong button or afraid that they're going to say something wrong or if it's not going to be, politically correct or whatever it is like. But I just want to show that like, hey, like let's just have the conversation and I think we'll find that there are things that we can both learn and understand and yeah, like being comfortable talking about it has been the best kind of remedy that I've had.
This idea of like being able to talk about it and being whether you're okay or you're not okay and being able to like say to somebody, you know what, I'm actually not okay and I don't know what I'm gonna do or I don't know what to do. I
Yeah.
think there's probably even a power in that, an incredible strength in that, in being able to just kind of open up in general. You've written about and it's about how you reached out to your therapist a few days after. I think it was 3 days after your dad had passed. Would you be okay sharing a little bit about that experience and some of the things that were helpful to you? I know you mentioned journaling is one of the most important things to you for your own mental health journey. But what was that like reaching out to your therapist just a few days after?
I think one of the most important things to recognize too is like I had been seeing my therapist for a couple years at
Uh-huh.
least, probably even 3 or 4 years prior to that. And so I had already had that relationship. I
Right.
had that foundation to have someone to call. So I was fortunate to have that in place. And I know that's not everyone's situation, but I think that was a good distinction to point out. There was so much going on right after my dad had passed. Like I was here in Charlotte, everything had happened in Columbus, Ohio. So I had to get, my wife, my two kids, all the way. I driven like that day all the way up. And, you're trying to just like, you're in flight mode. And so I was just kind of in that fight mode where I wasn't really processing all my emotions yet, but I was just like, okay, I need to get these things done. I got to make sure my brothers are okay. We got to reach out to these people. And it was, I was just like in such like that mode of like, I kind of had the blinders on, but
Uh,
it was really my wife too that was like, "Hey, you need to email your therapist. Like, you need to reach out to them, let them know what had happened, and that you need to get a meeting scheduled as soon as possible for when we get back
Yeah.
to Charlotte." And yeah, I was just like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like, I need to, and I need to start processing it because I just wasn't. I was numb to like after the initial shock. I was just pretty much numb for probably a week just because of everything else that had been going on. And I was just trying to do everything that I could to support my mom, my brothers, family members, everything. So having just my wife too kind of have that outside perspective and just say, "Hey, like you need to do this," was incredibly powerful and just what I needed in that moment. Yeah, and it helped me because then I could start processing. Then I could start talking about everything that had happened and really express everything that I was feeling in a healthy way, having healthy outlets. Okay, let's talk about grief and what you're actually feeling, and let's start that journey.
Mhm.
Essentially, is what it was, and I definitely am very thankful for my therapist who still helps me on that journey. And yeah, it's an incredible resource to have, and I always recommend to people like you can't fix these things on your own as much as you want to try to. And when I say that, I speak for myself too. Like I'm always someone who, oh, I can fix it. Like just
Yeah.
give me a day, give me a week, give me a month, whatever it is. I can fix it on my own. I can throw myself more into work. I can throw myself more into whatever it is.
Mhm.
And that's just like not the case. So yeah, that was a huge component of my healing process.
And I think that, I mean, you can really, really speak firsthand of that, even up to that point, right? Where as somebody who, again, going back to the just professionally, making it to the NFL as an undrafted free agent is statistically one of the harder to nearly impossible things that a person can do. And imagine that like you had shown yourself throughout your life that like a challenge comes up and you're gonna do everything that you need to do to overcome it or whatever the case might be. And then you get to a point where something like grief, something like loss, then it becomes much more ambiguous, right? It becomes much more, of course, more difficult. But the fact that and I think I'm really glad that that you brought up the distinction of like you had been seeing your therapist for several years prior to that point, and in the days in the time after your dad's passing, it kind of took your wife to tell you, hey, reach out, because this is just to say that like even with everything, I'm putting this in quotes, like in place as like the support and the foundation, those connections, the relationship, with your wife and her being able to tell you in that moment, having that person there to be able to say, hey, this is, you should reach out, right? Let's start this process and everything like that. And again, just that power of connection and community as well. So, Matt, I have a couple more questions for you. I just want to thank you so much again for joining the show. This has been such a privilege to be able to speak with you about your story and your journey. So, coming so sort of as far as the present moment, there's several things that you're involved with now, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what's been happening now, the work you're doing. And so there's a couple of things. There's Skura Sports Consulting, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that, and also the newsletter, that your incredible newsletter, which we're going to be sending out to everybody, all of our listeners, because it's really, you're an unbelievable writer, which is just another one of your many talents. But tell us a little bit about what's going on these days.
Yeah, so on the consulting front, it's really been able to take my experiences and help people in many different ways. So really, I would say now it's helping people on the corporate side
Mhm.
and that's where a lot of my public speaking has come into play. That's with teamwork, building teams, how to put the right teams together, building resilience, and having the right mindset to foster a great culture and have great leadership. So that's been a really fun and exciting way for me to take a lot of the passions that I've had and a lot of the experiences and pass them forward, pay them forward to in a way that's making a lot of impact. So that's been awesome. And then the newsletter was something that came up, and I always say like it's something that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. Just being able to formalize a way that can again take my experiences and share them with people that maybe are going through something similar, or it's an athlete that's gone through injury, or they're trying to overcome their own doubts, or whatever it is, trying to help elevate people's lives. And so the newsletter has been a great way for me. I love writing, and I think that's kind of through the journaling as well. Writing about all the different experiences I had and taking those like little moments, whether it's like the 4th and 1, and how we can take that mentality with us in our lives, whether that's me being a dad and a husband, or that's taking it into my professional life, just having the courage to take on something that is uncomfortable. And just if there's those moments where you're having a little bit of doubt or fear, to just go full on in it. And it honestly took me courage to start my newsletter. Like that, I thought that was something that was gonna be like, oh, let me just start it up and we'll go right in. But no, like
Mhm.
I was like, I had my own doubts and fears. Is anyone even gonna read this? Is this just gonna look silly? I think, and I even struggle with like putting myself out there on social media, and I'm like, because you just don't know. Like that's not. I'm more of an introverted person,
Sure.
and so putting myself out there is a little bit more uncomfortable. But the response I've had and the people I've been able to connect to has been awesome, and continuing to grow my newsletter has been really exciting. It puts a lot of structure and routine into my day, makes me really think and reflect on my career and my experiences, and how do I formalize those thoughts that will really connect and resonate with people. So that's really been what I've been doing now post football, and it's just been a great way to connect with people locally and around the country. So it's a really cool way to connect and learning a lot of new skills. It's just been great.
The newsletter is just fantastic, and again, we're going to link it out to all the listeners and everybody here in the community, because it's really incredibly well written. And it's interesting even hearing you talk about like some of the initial worry or apprehension kind of going into it, because it's like you're so good, like you're such a great writer, and the message and everything, the way that you tell stories is really incredible. So it's like, hey, if Matt's feeling that, then I think anyone who has any doubts, just go for it, because you're someone who has that talent to go out and write, and even you had some of those doubts.
100%. Yeah, it's definitely natural. And then once you get over it, like the other side, you're just like, oh man, like why did I even like
Yeah.
do it? You know?
So as far as I had seen, I think maybe 5 or 6 months ago, that you were doing some coaching locally in the Charlotte area. Is that something that's still going on? Is it, if yes or no, is coaching or just being involved in the game in that capacity something that's kind of on your radar at some point?
Yeah, no, I definitely want to say around the game of football. I just love the competitive environment, the way you build teams and keep teams together. I love the concept of how do you develop a culture and how do you get people to buy into it, and really, yeah, cultivating the best teams and the performance that goes into it. So yeah, the I've done some high school football coaching, and then coaching. I'm an assistant coach with my 4-year-old t-ball team.
Awesome.
So that's been another great exercise on patience and herding cats a little bit. And
Sure.
okay, like how do you but it really has been a great exercise of like, how do you teach some of the most basic and simple movements in a way that a 4 or 5-year-old would understand? And so it's been really cool for me and the coaches to figure that out. I think, yeah, I love sports. I love what it has given me and taught me. My older 2 kids love sports, and so it's been a great way for me to practice how do I talk to them in a way that builds their confidence? How do they handle adversity? And so it's been a great exercise to speak life into them as far as like, okay, healthy mental health practices. And like breathing techniques and how do you clear your mind? How do you just have confidence? How do you deal with, you didn't make your basketball shot. How do you go and take the next one? And all those different aspects. It's so yeah, I love sports and definitely I'm gonna find ways to stay around it.
I work with a lot of kids. It's probably a little over half my caseload are kids about like 8 to 16 or 17 or so, and it's always great working with kids on like mindfulness techniques and skills because kids will come in with like very few preconceived like notions or biases around those things. So it's like when you do that mindful breathing with them and they're like, that feels really good. And then you can talk about like, yeah, that's because, we're breathing all the time, but we're not often breathing with intentionality or mindfully. And then they're not coming in with any like baggage, basically. It's pretty cool to work with kids in that capacity too. So, last question I have for you is just around I asked you when you first came into the league and the ways that these things were talked about or not talked about, the ways that they were presented. Of course, now in the work that you do and in the circles that you're in and the conversations and people that you talk to, from your perspective, where are things now? I know you could I'm sure that you could speak not just to the NFL, but to some other areas as well. But does it feel like the needle has been moving in the right direction? Have we started to make some progress in destigmatizing these conversations and these discussions?
There's definitely been a lot of progress made, and a lot of these conversations are becoming more common in the locker room. Just
Hmm.
looking out for your teammates. And, I think like now that mental health practices are becoming more and more common at younger ages, like my son told me the other day, his breathing technique is you smell the birthday cake through your nose and you blow out the candles. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a great,
That's awesome.
like, I love that. And, and he's in preschool. So guys are learning and understanding, okay, what is it in myself that I'm noticing that maybe I need to go talk to someone about and being comfortable. And also, I can talk to a teammate about it, or hey, I can approach a teammate and say, hey, like, you just seem there has to be something going on. And being able to like have a conversation, like, guys are just more comfortable sitting down, whether that's at lunch, like going over to their homes and like having that time, like, hey, yeah, I'm like actually really struggling with this, whether it's something with their family, friend, whatever it is, and really leaning on those relationships. So there's definitely been a great shift and really just guys being more comfortable, especially men, like being more comfortable
Mhm.
talking about that because we all feel like, oh, okay, I'm feeling this way, but I don't think anyone else has ever felt anxious or doubted themselves or, you just kind of put those thoughts into your own head of like, oh, I'm just kind of alone and isolated in my feelings, which is not the case at all. Like majority of guys feel that. And so the more conversations we have of, hey, how did you get over, this situation, or how did you get confidence back into yourself? That is so important. And those conversations are happening every day at the professional level and things that I've experienced. Like it's just great to see that guys are more willing to talk about that stuff and it doesn't, discriminate across, age, race, whatever it is, like professions, guys who are older in their life, who are in their 50s and 60s, like that's becoming more common to
Yeah.
have those conversations. Like, and yeah, it's been great to see how much it's becoming commonplace and that it really is helping and it's saving lives too.
Because I think sports are I'm someone who's really big on the concept of the power of community, right? The power of that social connection and all of those sorts of things. And sports on paper, it's this unbelievable opportunity for community building and connection and all those sorts of things. And I think it's like there's an incredible opportunity to have those spaces, to have the locker rooms, those places be places where these conversations are normalized. And I know that there's been, progress in that area, but it's just to say that, like, what a great opportunity. And now it's just taking people like you, right? The courage of people like you of talking about those things openly and saying and sharing that, if anyone out there feels like they're the only person to have felt something, the feeling is very valid, but they're probably wrong in the sense
Yep.
that other people have
100%.
felt that too. So again, it's I just can't thank you enough for joining the show. I lied. I do have a final question because I am a Bears fan and I have to, therefore I'm like a lot of NFL fans, but I think specifically a Bears fan. I'm got to get my meatball hat on for a second. We have
Yep.
a new coach here in Chicago, Ben Johnson. You played in the league for several teams for 7 years. I'm curious, maybe you don't, but I was just curious if you ever crossed paths with, or if you have any intel or have ever heard any stories about our new guy here in Chicago, Ben Johnson.
Other than just, I don't have any like insider
Yeah.
information, but I mean, just from what TV and media say, like, and I think some of the guys who have been around him too,
Mhm.
just talk about how great of a leader he is and how he motivates the team and how well he gets everyone prepared. And so if you have someone that you can buy into and buy into their vision, like they'll do well. And they've done a good job of acquiring some really good pieces in the free agency
Well,
front.
a lot
So
of offensive linemen. They rebuilt their whole line.
yeah, so I think they're definitely heading in the right direction. And you just got to have some patience too. Like,
Yeah.
maybe the first year will go great, and I hope it does. But if it doesn't, like, you just got to realize, like, there's so many moving parts to an organization and what goes into it, and sometimes it can take time for all of it to click. But when it does, like, you gotta take advantage. So I'm excited to see how a lot of these teams do. I just get excited about free agency
Yeah.
and all the moving pieces and how it comes together because it's new guys having to gel. So yeah, it'll be a cool experience to see how it all comes together for them in Chicago.
A reporter asked Ben Johnson the other day, like, how are you going to make it with a lot of these new guys here, the rookies and guys who are new to the team? How are you going to make it like easier for them or more comfortable? And I really loved his answer. He said, I don't know if you saw this, but he said, well, it's not going to be easy. He goes, that's not, our job isn't to make it easy, but it's hard. It's really hard to succeed. It's hard to win and all that kind of stuff. But he said, and with that said, he goes, we're going to fail and that's okay. And I thought that was such a critical, and I loved that answer because it's like, it's not about making it easy, but it's about that it's knowing that it's going to be hard and that it's okay, that failure is okay. It's a part of the process. You speak about how, progress, one of my favorite things, progress isn't linear, right? And it's not so much about is making it easy, but it's about accepting the fact that, or navigating the fact that there will be failure, there will be challenges and struggles. And I just thought, like, from even a mental health aspect, there's a lot of truth in that. And I don't know, at some point the Bears have to find the right guy. So hopefully it's Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
So again, Matt Skura, thank you so much for joining Courage Speaks. This was like I said earlier, such an incredible privilege and honor to be able to speak with you. The work you're doing is unbelievably important. I thank you as somebody in the mental health field for the work that you're doing. It's literally saving lives. It's literally, like, it's just unbelievably critical and important, and moving. These are the things that move the needle forward. I didn't know your father. I'm getting to know you, but I know that what you're doing is keeping his legacy, and just even you telling his story. I feel like even just it's a privilege to even be able to hear a little bit about him and the incredible person that he was and that he is. So thank you again for the work, and I really hope we can stay connected.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Sam, for having me. This was an awesome show, and I appreciate you giving me the time to talk.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks as always to John Marikoski for writing and producing our beautiful theme music, and thank you again to Matt for just another awesome conversation. To learn more about Matt's work in mental performance consulting, visit www.mattskura.com. You can also subscribe to Matt's incredible newsletter at mattskura.substack.com. Thank you for tuning into Courage Speaks. We want to remind our listeners that the information and discussions presented in this podcast are intended solely for educational purposes. The content provided is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. It's important to consult with qualified mental health professionals or healthcare providers for personalized guidance regarding your individual situation. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, the field of mental health is complex and ever-evolving. The views and opinions expressed by the host, guests, or participants are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Courage to Connect Mental Health Center. As always, for Courage Speaks, I'm your host, Sam Sherman. Be kind, talk soon.